Welcome to Zika Examinations Answering Techniques. We're going to be covering PFM3, which is Governance and Management in the Public Sector. I'm your presenter, Choto Siame. By way of introduction, Governance and Management in the Public Sector is one of the 6 modules contained in the Zika Diploma in Public Sector Financial Management. Candidates who pass all the modules will be awarded the Zika Diploma in Public Sector Financial Management. The public sector plays a major role in society. In most economies, public expenditure forms a significant part of gross domestic product (GDP), and public sector entities are substantial employers and major capital market participants. The public sector determines, usually through a political process, the outcomes it wants to achieve and the different types of interventions. These include enacting legislation or regulations, delivering goods and services, redistributing income through mechanisms such as taxation or social security payments, and the ownership of assets or entities such as state-owned enterprises. In short, public sector organizations are there to ensure that public service goods and services are availed to all citizens of society. This is why we often hear the common saying, "Boma yanganepo," meaning government should look at this issue, because the citizens of a nation look to government to provide them with services like education, hospitals, roads, and so on. We never hear of a person saying, "Tell company ABC to fix the roads," or "Tell company ABC to build a hospital." We all look to government to say we need more clinics, we need more hospitals, and so on. So one of the key terms that you'll find in public sector in governance and management in the public sector are things like accountability, transparency, and so on. Because people want to know, what is the government doing about hospitals? What are they doing about schools? How was that money that was given by donors used in relation to building new roads, new hospitals, new schools, and so on? So the private sector only comes to complement what government is doing. When we talk about governance and management in the public sector, we're really talking about the government delivering goods and services to the citizens of that particular country. And this is the reason why you would hear people demanding for certain services, certain goods. They'll say, "Why isn't government doing this?" Or "Boma yangane popali ichi," and all that, because people know that all these basic services are supposed to be provided by the government. You never hear of people calling upon private companies to do something about the roads, or to build hospitals, or to build clinics and education schools in communities. Yes, private organizations will come in just to complement the services that government is providing. So you find that in hospitals, you have private hospitals, you would have private schools. So those people who want an alternative service to what government is providing can go to those alternative services. Otherwise, primarily, it is the job of a government, of any society, to provide goods and services that everybody in that society will be able to access. And so you will hear key terms in this course of governance and public management in the public sector, like accountability, transparency. You hear things about corruption, integrity, and so on. What are the objectives of this presentation? The main objective of this presentation is to help students with both technique and practice. Also, effective examination techniques involves preparing thoroughly, knowing the subject content, and managing pre-exam anxiety and stress. Remembering some important techniques highlighted in this presentation while sitting for the exam can make all the difference between passing and failing. On successful completion of this course, a student is expected to explain decentralization and how it impacts on the functioning of government entities, demonstrate good leadership and management skills, communicate effectively using various media. The structure of your examination paper would be as follows. We have a section 1, which is a compulsory question carrying 40 marks. This is a case study. And then section B will have 4 questions, of which you answer any 3, and each will be worth 20 marks. I'm now going to discuss competencies that are expected of students. Students must review the study manual and revision kit. These are readings from the Zika PFM3 study materials in order to familiarize themselves with the contents of the course. This means that students must study and cover the whole syllabus, ensuring that they read widely and develop competencies as follows. Number 1, that is demonstrating competence in knowledge. What do I mean by that? I mean understanding the question correctly and presenting the correct answer. Number 2, I mean the examiner should not be left to second guess what the student probably meant. So this just means that when coming up with your answer, it should be as clear as possible, and the examiner should not be left with wondering, did she or he mean this or that? Secondly, the second competence is demonstrating competence in comprehension. Using the right terms, concepts, and language that is specific to the area of study. Each subject has got specific words and expressions that show the students understand what they are answering. For example, this course in governance and public management will have certain key words that will be often used in questions and in your answering. Keywords like public sector, you should know that very well, what it means. Public sector management, which is PSM. Governance is a word that is used often in this subject. Transparency, integrity, corruption. Those are some of the terms and the concepts and the language that you will often see in this course. The third competency is demonstrating competence in analysis and evaluation. This calls for coherence and synthesis of the points needed to answer the question. So when you are answering, your answers should be coherent. They should make sense. They should be something that the examiner, when marking, will not have a problem trying to figure out. The student needs to develop an answer plan and demonstrate how related points reach a desired conclusion. So these are the main 3 competencies that will be expected of students taking this course. I now want to tackle the common mistakes exhibited by students. Number 1, answering only parts of the questions. So a question is laid out, but you answer perhaps the first portion, but leave out the second portion. Some questions call for a complete explanation. So you will have something like define governance and explain how accountability can be achieved in public sector organizations or something like that as an example. And you just define governance and you don't explain the rest of the question. You don't answer the rest of the question. That means you've only answered a part of the question. Obviously, that's going to cost you marks. Lack of understanding of some of the topics and either presenting rather simplistic opinions or failing to explain many of the assertions made. If you make a certain assertion in your answer, be ready to back it up. Why are you saying what you're saying? So just don't simply say, oh, because of this, that. be able to explain and back up your answer. Why are you saying there's corruption because of A, B, C, D? You need to be able to back up your answer with facts, not just asserting something. Failure to critically analyze case study as seen by the quality of answers presented. Remember that this course has a compulsory question which is 40 marks. This is a case study that involves critical analysis of the case. So you first have to understand, what is this case saying? What are the main points of this case study? If there's any way to highlight or circle some of the key things that are coming out, the main things that are coming out, you can do them as you're reading the case. You can highlight those or underline those, because most likely the questions that follow up will be asking of certain aspects within that case. So it's very important to understand what the case is all about and what the key themes are that are coming out of that case. Because if you don't understand that case study, if you don't have those skills to critically analyze, it will affect the quality of the answer that you're going to present. So what I'm saying here, that most students are able to answer the compulsory 40-mark question and the 3 20-mark questions. But then again, you need to be mindful to allocate time carefully in the examination. Some students appear to spend far too long on the compulsory question, which is question 1, leaving themselves insufficient time to present a good answer to the other 3 questions. A high mark in question 1 is no good if the other questions are poor. So if you don't allocate your time properly and you spend most of your time on question 1 because it carries a lot of marks, then you may not have time to do the other 3 questions that you need to cover, and you either end up leaving them out and not answering, therefore you will not get the good quality marks that you should have gotten. I'm continuing on with the common mistakes by students. These ones are more on a general side. There's mixing up. One of the problems experienced by students was to confuse public sector with public companies. This is not one and the same, okay? Waffling, just writing something and going around circles without exactly answering what has been asked. Students have the habit of doing that. They go around the circles without actually answering the question that has been asked. Not presenting answers in a logical and orderly manner. Your answer should have a flow to it. From beginning, as you start, there should be a middle part and there should be an ending, a conclusion. So it should be a logical way of presentation that the examiner, when marking, is able to follow your explanation or your discussion or your analysis of the situation. Lack of time management. Not planning time appropriately for each question answered. It is important while in the exam to plan how much time you're going to spend answering each question. Not having a proper plan of which questions to answer and in what order will also make you lose time. So again, at the beginning of the exam, mark or jot down the questions that you're going to answer and in what order you're going to answer them. You use your time more efficiently doing it that way. Not balancing time required to answer a specific part of the question against the marks allocated. This is another very important point. If a question only is worth 5 marks, you don't want to spend a significant amount of time answering a 5-mark question when you could just write a paragraph. A paragraph would be sufficient for a 5-mark question. But then you find students writing a page and a half, 2 pages for a 5-mark question. So look at the marks and balance it in terms of how much time you're going to require to answer it. And then finally, poor handwriting, spellings, and grammar. Those This is also a common mistake exhibited by students, which can also cost you marks, because if the examiner is struggling to make out what you're saying due to your poor handwriting, it will be very difficult sometimes to allocate you the marks that you deserve. The next thing that I'm going to cover is preparing for an exam. Okay. Number one, revise actively. Studying and preparing is vital to success in exams. The more your brain you can engage in the revision, the more you will remember. Ensure to go through your study manual and revision kit, making sure that you have adequately covered the whole syllabus. Don't just read. Extract key points, write them down yourself somewhere. Make flashcards. You can get paper, tear them into nice size smaller papers, and just write down some of these key terms, the definitions, and so on. As you're writing them down, that's a form of study as well. So even if you're just copying them out, this is better than just reading. Since more of your brain is involved, you are more active. Okay? Make up quizzes, practice questions, and do them. Get active. So anticipate. What are some of the questions that may come on your exams? What are some of the maybe definitions, or some of the explanations, or some of the discussions that may come? What are some of the key terms in governance and management in the public sector that may come up in this examination? So make some questions for yourself of what kind of a question can come. Practice how you are going to answer it. This is all part of your revision. And so this is why I say here, think about what kinds of themes might be asked and make some possible outlines, which is just some possible answers of how you may answer them. Okay? So in this course, think about things like questions coming from human resources. What are human resource functions? Questions coming from the contract life cycle. Okay? Factors that influence public policy, rules of negotiating, etc. Think of questions that may come from such themes. Number two, do past papers. Papers from previous years are typically stored in the library. Work through them. If you can't do a question, check if it is still in the syllabus. With a good revision plan, you should be doing nothing in the last week before the exam except working through exam papers and example sheets, making sure you can do them. This is critical to examination success. Try to do the exam questions from the past papers against the clock. Time is short in an exam. You need to get used to thinking and writing quickly. Get your hand trained up so that it can write fast but legibly, please. So you're at home or wherever you are with your study groups and so on, you have your past paper, it's the 20-mark question. See how quickly but legibly you can answer that question to make sure that you stay within the time frame. So you can do a practice even on your own, whether you're at home or with your friends studying. Set up a practice test examination. Give it the same 3 hours that you spend in an exam and try to answer each question within the proper and within the allocated time. And then go for tuition. If possible, students are encouraged to seek tuition services, preferably from Zika accredited centers. The staff providing tuition have been accredited by Zika to provide such services to students. Okay, so when you feel that you need help, you are out there somewhere studying alone, seek out these services so that you can get the tuition and get get proper marks out of your exam. Like, don't feel because you were alone studying somewhere, this has negatively impacted your ability to pass the course. Seek out these services, get the help that you need, so that you can get good results on your examination.
Are you a talented student thinking of a career in accountancy? Do you desire to develop a successful and internationally recognized qualification? CA Zambia will help you achieve your career aspirations. Make the right choice and shape your career in business and finance. CA Zambia, not just an accountant, but a chartered accountant. CA Zambia, developing business leaders.
The exam itself, okay? Earlier we were talking about preparing for an exam. Now we're talking about the exam itself. How do you deal with the exam itself? So these are some of the techniques that I'll be going through now. Planning how to tackle the examination. The first thing to do is read over carefully the exam paper. Remember, you're now in the examination room. Candidates will be allowed 15 minutes reading time. In this time, work out which questions you are going to answer, which order you are going to answer them in, and plan your time in the exam. How much time you are going to spend answering each question. So this is at the beginning. You haven't been told to start writing yet, but you're going through all this. You're going through the questions. You've identified which ones that you're going to answer, and you are ready to go before the invigilator even says, start the examination. Don't be tempted to do a question on subject X just because it is a subject you know most about. Are you sure you can do it? So you ask yourself these questions. Which parts can you do? How many marks do you think you can get on the parts of the question you can do? Work it out for each part of the question. Which question is likely to get you the most marks? That's the one that you will select. Okay? Just because you know a part of the question. So this is a situation where the question is coming with A, B, C. You may only know A, maybe it carries 5 marks. The B and the C, which carry more marks, you may not know them like very well. So you're better off leaving that question and looking at the other ones where you're fairly confident that from A, B, and C, you will get very good marks. If not a perfect score, but at least close to that. Reading the whole question is also important. Many questions lead you through a problem. The answer to part A is used in part B, etc. There might be clues in later parts of the question about what the examiner is expecting. Make sure you spot them, okay? This just means that you need to pay attention to reading the whole question. So sometimes your A will lead you to what's being asked in B. So if you know the answer to A, it will naturally lead you to the B now to expand on the answering of the B part because clues would have already been given to you. Most questions might start, maybe an A might be, oh, define this, that. The B maybe might be explain the importance of, so if A is define governance, maybe B might follow to say explain the importance of governance in public sector organizations and so on. So it allows you to, that A is allowing you to build up in B. So clues have already been given to you. Make a rough answer plan, jotting down key points that come to mind and arrange them into some kind of order. This may take a few minutes, but will help in presenting a satisfactory and orderly answer. This just means before you write your essay, the one that will be submitted, you jot down some points of what you think is important in that answer to address. So from those points, you'll now be expanding as you write your essay to that question. When working out timescales, try to balance the time spent on a part of the question against the marks you will achieve. I alluded to that earlier, just to say that it's very important to balance up the question and the time that is allocated. Again, don't spend too much time on a question that is 5 marks or 2 marks when you could have better spent that time on another question that was worth 10 marks. Plan time accordingly. Remember, exam questions are not about writing down everything you know about a topic. If you do this, you will most certainly run out of time. You are trying to get the best mark you can on the whole paper, not just on the question you happen to be doing at the time. This happens when students get carried away. They get carried away because they know so much about that particular topic, and they keep writing and writing and writing, forgetting that there are two other questions that they haven't tackled yet. And so as examiners, we find these situations where we are flipping through an answer script, and you're thinking, but why didn't this person answer this other question? They were supposed to answer 4 questions in total, but they've only answered 3, or they've only answered 2. Most likely, that person ran out of time because they got carried away on one question, trying to write everything that they knew about that particular question. So try to avoid that, and just remember that you have a time frame that you need to stick to. Number 2, you want to make sure that you do the easiest question first, okay? There is absolutely no reason to do the question in the order that they are printed on the examination paper. It is recommended that you do the easiest ones first. Simply being because if you do the easiest question first, you get that morale booster. It will be like a morale booster to you that, oh, I've tackled this, it's now under my belt, and so on. So it will give you that morale. It will give you more time as well to answer the other parts of the question, maybe the other 2 that may not have been so easy. Number 3, look at the marking schemes. There's a lot of useful material there. If there are 4 marks available for the description of XXX, or description in this case of accountability, okay, then the marking scheme will probably have 4 key points. Mention them all. So if you are asked to describe, for example, what are the 4 characteristics of accountability, most likely even the points will be there will be 4 key points that you'll be requiring to give, and there will probably be 4 marks for each of those. So mention them all and get the marks. Don't spend half an hour writing a long essay for a 2-mark questions, as I mentioned earlier. People still do that. It's a waste of time, better spent on other parts of the question. Definition of examination key terms. Okay? It is always beneficial to define key terms that are part of the examination question, even if you have not been asked to do so. This gives you a better chance of to remember and adequately address the requirements of the question. So in the example I gave earlier, maybe you're being asked to give 4 characteristics of accountability, or let's just say in this case, the example is give 4 characteristics of good governance, okay? So as a student, even if you haven't been asked to say, define good governance, it will be best to start from that angle where you define what good governance is, and then you follow it up by those characteristics. So this gives the examiner, that it allows the examiner to have that feel, to be happy really with the student, to say, this is a student who knows what she or he is talking about. They understand the concepts. Number 5, be concise and relevant. So concise and relevance. It is important to present your answer in a concise and logical way. Your essay should not have a lot of unnecessary irrelevant information, but must address the question or all parts of the question. Again, this goes back to one of the common mistakes of waffling, where you're just saying things, you're just all over the place. The examiner is thinking, okay, where is the answer to this? But you've written so much, you've written a page, but you haven't actually been been concise. You haven't been relevant in answering that specific question. And then number 6, don't get stuck. If you're answering a question and you are drawing a blank, you can't remember what you had studied, don't just keep tapping your desk or just, you're just blank and you're doing nothing. Quickly move on to the next question. So avoid writer's block, which just simply means you may have even revised the last night or 2 nights ago, but now you're in the examination room and you just draw a blank. You can't remember, okay? You haven't got time for this. If you get stuck on a question, move on. Start doing another question, okay? Remember, what I'm addressing now is you are actually in the examination room. Okay? Staring at a question you don't know how to answer is a waste of time. And you would be amazed how often, when coming back to the question after half an hour, it will suddenly become clear. So rather than waste your time on that to say, you're trying to remember, but I looked at this last night, I reviewed this last night. Just move on. And then at the end of the exam, when you have your extra time, you can always go back, and those ideas and concepts and so on may come flooding back, and that way you will have that opportunity to answer that question. If you don't have time to write sentences, but you do know what to do, then just write bullet points. That's in a case where you've run out of time. You don't have time to do a narrative, write in an essay form. Just write some bullet points. Just jot down bullet points that show the answer, like what you meant to write, but due to time, you didn't manage. So you'll get credit for that. You'll get marks for that, because the examiner will see that she or he knew what to do, but they probably didn't have time. But the answers are there in bulleted form, although not fully written out in an essay. Number 7, if you're running out of time, suppose you have got time left to do 1 question, but 2 questions still left to do. Which one do you choose? The way to maximize your marks is to do the first half of both questions. You gain faster marks at the start of the question than at the end of the question, okay? So again, this is another way to sort of maximize the time that you have remaining. If you're running out of time, you still have 2 questions left. So if you're going to answer 1 question through a whole long essay, you will not have time to even attempt the second one that's still remaining. So here I'm suggesting that you do half of 1 question and another half of the other question, so that at least you get marks from both. Because if you concentrate on saying, let me do question 3, you won't have time to even tackle question 4. So if you are running out of time again, do half of question 3, do half of question 4. At least it will somehow balance out, because you'll get some marks from both. Never leave an exam early. Okay? This is just to say that the only possible excuse for this is when you are absolutely sure that you have gotten 100% in the exam. Okay? And this is rare, really. So that should never happen of you trying to leave an exam early. There's always something you can do to improve your paper. Check and check again. This is the opportunity for you to add more explanations wherever necessary. So you finished your exams, you've tackled all the questions, but there's still time remaining. You finished answering all the questions. There's no need for you to rush out just to go and join your friends who've maybe left the room and so on. You are better off staying back and checking your work again. Are there any valid points that you didn't have before, that you can add now that you've got this extra time on hand? This is what this point is saying. Earlier, I'd referred to things like situations where even if you haven't been asked to define, you can define a term just to show that you know the concepts and so on. In connection with that, I'd like to talk about common examination instruction words that you will see coming up in your exams over and over again. So I'm saying here that when you're answering an essay question, pay attention to the common examination instruction words in order to answer the question adequately. Examples of the said terminologies or terms are things like define. Define means that you're giving, what we mean by define is you give meaning to an idea, okay? What does that particular term mean? So, for example, define governance. And then you hear a terminology such as describe. This is where you are giving details of processes, properties, events, and so on. E.g., describe the factors involved in contract management. Discuss. This is where you discuss, you explain, you give examples, points for and against. E.g., discuss factors that influence public policy. Explain. This is where you give detailed reasons for an idea, principle, or result. So here I would say, for example, explain the role of a manager. And then there's compare, where you put items side by side. You want to see the similarities, you want to see the differences. So for example, in this course, we have a topic on communication. So I would say, compare verbal communication and non-verbal communication. And then finally, contrasts. That is where you are emphasizing differences between two things. For example, centralization and decentralization, or centralization versus decentralization. Okay, so these are the common examination instruction words that you will see in your examination papers. Next, I would like to show a sample compulsory question. As I alluded to earlier, this examination has a section A, which is compulsory, carries a 40 marks, and section B, where it has 4 questions, you answer 3, each question being 20 marks, and therefore adds up to 60. So in section A, the compulsory question is about understanding case studies and being able to analyze these case studies. So in this example, there's a case study on the World Bank's work on governance and public sector management. So throughout the case study, it talks about what the World Bank expects as good governance, things like accountability, transparency, and so on. So this would be maybe a 1-page case study of which you have to read carefully. As I said before, underline some of the key themes, because those may be answers to the questions that will follow the case study. So the whole entire case in the sample compulsory question is about the World Bank's work on governance and public sector management. This is just an example of what a compulsory question 1 would look like. I have highlighted here some of the key themes that are coming out. Things like where the bank, which is the World Bank's public service management approach, emphasizes that success is to be found in what the public sector actually does, its behavior and the outcome it produces, not its formal legal or organizational structure. Similarly, the bank's updated governance and anti-corruption strategy notes that improvements in the governance environment are assessed by results at the country level, with transparency, integrity, and probity strengthened throughout government, and by improvements in the responsiveness of country assistance strategy and projects to the distinctive country context through governance, diagnostics, and risk assessments. So the bank here, the World Bank, is talking about how they assist governments in their efforts to improve transparency, accountability, and service delivery. So it goes on to talk about some of those deliverables, what they expect from countries at a country level as it relates to governance and public sector management. So after reading the entire case, I show a sample. I have not read the entire case, but if you were the one in the examination room, of course you would read the entire case. I was just trying to sort of bring out what I had highlighted. So you have the A part, which says define good governance and explain 4 principles of good governance. Okay. This you would know because you would have read this in your modules, in your revision kits, and so on. You would have read about this, what governance is, and the characteristics, the 4 principles of good governance. And then the B part, which I want to concentrate on, says identify some of the World Bank's major concerns on governance and public sector management by most third world countries like Zambia. So this question already directly links to the case study that we just read and some of the key themes that I underlined. So in answer to this question, without going into much details, the details are what you would go through as you're writing an essay. So in order to answer this question, identify and discuss some of the World Bank major concerns on governance and public sector management by most third world countries like Zambia, I would have read the case. If I was not sure, I would refer back to the case. And again, that's why I'm saying it's good to underline the key themes as you are reading the case the first time, so that you can easily go back to those points. You'll find that even when you go back, you will find accountability coming out. So that is one of World Bank's major concerns. So you discuss accountability. You're going to discuss transparency. That's another concern, a major concern for the World Bank, for countries like ourselves. You discuss corruption, because that also is coming out. Having those anti-corruption, kind of policies in third world countries is very important as part of governance. And then the rule of law and integrity is also something that the World Bank is concerned about. So these are coming directly from the case. If you had underlined or highlighted some of the major themes in the case study, you'll be able to see that these will easily come out when you answer question B. So this is just a sample of how you would answer this B part of the compulsory question.